There has long been a debate within Christianity as to whether man has free will or God has predetermined everything. Some people insist that every man has free will and is always free to choose or reject salvation. Others claim that God is sovereign and chose before the foundation of the world who would be saved and who would not. This debate not only pertains to salvation, it also pertains to simple obedience. The free will side says man can choose to obey or disobey God. Those on the side of God's sovereignty say that men are mere puppets and their adherence to God's law is imposed upon them. Today's passage tells us Jesus made a statement that his disciples did not understand. The reason they failed to comprehend it gives us some insight into the solution to the free will versus God's sovereignty debate. Yesterday, we read that Jesus took Peter, James, and John up on a mountain. While Jesus was praying, his face and clothing began gleaming, and he spoke with Moses and Elijah. Then a cloud enveloped the three disciples, and a voice said, "This is my Son, my chosen one." After the transfiguration, Jesus, Peter, James, and John came down from the mountain. A man asked Jesus to cast a demon out of his son, and Jesus did so. Now let's pick up reading at Luke 9, verse 43. And they were all astonished at the majesty of God. But while everyone was marveling at all that he was doing, he said to his disciples, "Put these words into your ears, for the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men." But they did not understand this statement, and it was concealed from them, so that they would not perceive it, and they were afraid to ask him about this statement. Notice the word concealed. There has long been a debate within Christianity as to whether man has free will or God has determined everything. This verse does not answer that definitively, but it does give us some insight into the answer. The word concealed tells us the disciples were prevented from understanding Jesus' statement about his impending death. That means, in this particular case, God exercised his sovereignty and prevented the men from gaining knowledge. That does not mean God always does that. It means he did it in this case. When we ask whether man has free will or God predetermines everything, we know at a minimum that there are times when God exercises his sovereignty and does not allow men to exercise free will. The debate over man's free will versus God's sovereignty is usually framed as being one or the other. Either man always has free will or God always exercises his sovereignty and imposes his will on humans. Perhaps the answer to the free will versus God's sovereignty debate is a combination of both. The answer might be that sometimes God predetermines human behavior, and sometimes God allows humans to exercise their free will. Verse 46. Now an argument started among them as to which of them might be the greatest. This is a normal human debate. Humans tend to be competitive. Most people want to be richer, more talented, and more rewarded than their family and friends. In this case, the individual disciples were not content just to be part of the 12. They wanted to be at the top of the 12. Verse 47. But Jesus, knowing what they were thinking in their heart, took a child and stood him by his side, and said to them, "Whoever receives this child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me, for the one who is least among all of you, this is the one who is great." This is a common theme throughout the teachings of Jesus. The greatest is the least, and the least is the greatest. Verse 49. And John answered and said, "Master, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to hinder him because he does not follow along with us." But Jesus said to him, "Do not hinder him, for he who is not against you is for you." This is an interesting exchange. John and the disciples were concerned because someone who was not part of their group was casting out demons. The fact that this person did not follow Jesus leads to doubt that he was authorized to cast out demons. However, the text also seems to indicate that he was successfully casting out demons, in which case he was probably getting that power from God. Jesus obviously was not concerned about it. He did not explain it to his disciples. He simply told them to let the man alone. Just because someone is outside the inner circle does not mean he is wrong. No one human is privy to everything God is doing, so just because John and the disciples did not know if the man was authorized, did not mean he was not. God does not have to explain himself. We do not have a right to see the big picture of what God is doing in the world. Verse 51. Now it happened that when the days for him to be taken up were soon to be fulfilled, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. And he sent messengers on ahead of him, and they went and entered a village of the Samaritans to make arrangements for him. But they did not receive him, because he was journeying with his face toward Jerusalem. And when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Revenge is a natural human reaction to being snubbed or insulted. In this case, the disciples wanted to take revenge on the Samaritans because they did not receive Jesus. Verse 55. But Jesus turned and rebuked them and said, You do not know what kind of spirit you are of. For the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went on to another village. Romans 12:19 commands us not to take revenge. Jesus did not issue that command here, but he did model abstention from revenge. We should emulate Jesus. Verse 57. And as they were going along the road, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, The foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Many modern Christians have the mindset that we should gain as many converts to Christianity as possible. Therefore, they try to minimize the cost of being a Christian. They do not say anything that might deter people from following Jesus. However, Jesus had a different approach. When a person along the road offered to follow him, Jesus immediately pointed out that following him meant not having a home. Jesus was very clear about the difficulty of following him. When we evangelize, we should not sugarcoat our message. We need to clearly communicate the sacrifice and expectations that come along with being a Christian. Verse 59. And Jesus said to another, Follow me. But he said, Lord, permit me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, Allow the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim everywhere the kingdom of God. Jesus told this person to allow the spiritually dead to bury the physical dead. Verse 61. Another also said, I will follow you, Lord, but first permit me to say farewell to those at home. But Jesus said to him, No one, after putting his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. Jesus did not set low standards just to have as many followers as possible. Instead, Jesus set high standards. In order to be fit for the kingdom of God, a person has to be fully committed. There has long been a debate within Christianity as to whether man has free will or God has predetermined everything. Luke 9 does not answer that definitively, but it does give us some insight into the answer. The disciples were prevented from understanding Jesus' statement about his impending death. That means, in this particular case, God exercised his sovereignty and prevented the men from gaining knowledge. The debate over man's free will versus God's sovereignty is usually framed as being one or the other. Either every man always has free will, or God always exercises his sovereignty and imposes his will on all humans. The answer might be that sometimes God predetermines human behavior, and sometimes God allows humans to exercise their free will. Thanks for visiting Bible Mountain. If you have already joined my email list, thank you, and please tell others about Bible Mountain. If you have not joined my email list yet, please do so now. In order to join, go to BibleMountain.com, click on subscribe, and that will take you to a page where you can sign up. Your email address will not be sold nor given away. Once again, thanks for visiting Bible Mountain.